I was just putting a mint in my mouth. Not for any good reason. That's because I want one. It's, I just felt like it. And right before live stream's the perfect time to do that. Yes. Absolutely perfect timing. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So we are here today for Coturnix Quail. Look behind me. Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Those are Coturnix Quail in that hutch behind me. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann. I run a small hobby farm called Andersen Acres, and every Friday we go live. And most people watch us on the replay. I know that. That's fine. I go live at an inconvenient time for most people. I understand. That's fine. So today we're going to do something that I've neglected to do because this is week 3, the 3rd week of the month. And week 3 is our animal spotlight. Our animal spotlight focuses on a different animal we have or that you might have on your hobby farm that we've had before and maybe don't have anymore or things like that. And I haven't done the quail. I just realized that a few days ago when someone asked, when are you going to do the quail? And I went, okay, well, they've had videos, but they've never had a live stream. So our Coturnix Quail are in there. You can see them bouncing around. We've got several different colors. We've got your traditional pharaohs. We've got silvers. We've got pansies. We've got fairies. We've got a few different color quail in that pen. We are not currently breeding for color. We are breeding for size and hardiness. So to us right now, color doesn't matter. We want them to be a decent size, and we want them to be able to handle 40 below winters. So that's why you don't see a bunch of super fancy colors, because we're keeping the largest, hardiest birds. Okay, so these guys don't get nearly enough attention around here. While the goats are out being dramatic and the chickens are, well, everywhere. Chickens. They're everywhere. And the horse is doing whatever he's doing. I don't even know. He's over there. He's fine. I couldn't see him, but he's over there. Well, they're all doing their thing. The quiet little stars of the farm are there. These guys are fantastic. Okay? These small, chatty, round little birds in this little hutch next to the chicken pen that the chickens never stand, those are Coturnix quail. There are several different types of quail you might have on your farm. For us, I like Coturnix. I am going to add other types of quail over the years. These guys are the best place to start. And I've had like California quail with the cute little curly cues on their head. I have had those before. I've had blue scale, and eventually I'll get back to them. But for sheer usefulness to the farm, you can't beat the Coturnix. Okay? These guys are fantastic. Now, if you've been following Andersen Acres for a while, you've seen the goats and the ducks and Shadowfax escaping his pen and the turkey that won't get off the roof. And, you've probably seen them all. And that's great. But the quail, I don't really film them all the time. Why don't I film them? Well, because they're little and they're in their hutch, you can't let quail free range. Let's be very clear. You cannot let your quail free range. If you try to let your quail free range, you will never see them again. They don't have that homing instinct. The chickens and the ducks and the turkeys, they come home at the end of the day. Despite the fact that they are all over the place, at night, they go back in the barn. The quail won't do that. You might want them to. We all do. They will not. They don't home. Okay. So they have to stay in their little pen. And because they're in their pen, I don't film them that often. I walk by and go, yeah, quail are doing great. Sure. But I don't actually showcase them. And I should. Because there are undercover comedians. They might be small, but they've got personality packed into every feather. So today we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive, really deep, into the wonderful world of Coturnix quail. We'll talk about their care, their eggs, their habits, their hilarious noises, and why I think they deserve a lot more credit on small farms and homesteads. And at the end, I will get to, I've got, I think, 30 questions that people have submitted that they wanted me to answer on the live stream. So I will be answering some of those questions. You're about to hear a lot of geese. It's migration season. There are literally hundreds of them flying through the sky right now. Luckily, they're moving pretty quick. Very good. Lots of them. It's migration season. Geese happen. You can't control that. It's a live stream. If it was a regular video, I'd edit that out because that's a lot of quail in a very short amount of time. I don't know why the turkey is refusing to jump over the board. He can jump over the board. Doesn't matter. All right. So let's talk about Coturnix quail. First things first, what exactly are they? The name sounds fancy, I know, but they're actually one of the most common and well-loved domestic quail species in the world. Sometimes they're called Japanese quail. It's raining a little bit. Oh, well. But sometimes they're called Japanese quail, and they have been bred for centuries for both their eggs and their meat. Yes, you can have both. You can have eggs and meat from these little guys. Okay? Coturnix are small, really small. A full-grown adult only weighs a few ounces. Think of a really fat hamster that happened to grow wings. That's, they're not huge. They're not pounds. You don't weigh them in pounds like you do a chicken. You weigh them in ounces. They're little. So you might think they're not that useful. But don't let them fool you. They're little egg-laying machines. Well, wild quail are kind of flighty and difficult to catch and difficult to control. Coturnix quail are calm, adaptable, and surprisingly friendly once they get used to you. They've been domesticated for so long that they don't really fly away, even if they could fly away. They're like the chickens of the quail world. Happy to live in hutches, comfortable with people, endlessly curious about whatever you're doing nearby. They will stare at you and even call out to you. That's a few of them are staring at me now. And they'll even call out to you to figure out what you're doing. They're really adorable and well worth having on your farm. Our little group lives in that cozy little hutch right behind me, right beside the chicken pen. They have lived in this hutch over here as well, but for coming winter, this one gives them a little more space. And it's also located in a bit of a better area so that they can't, well, then jump out. Then jump out. Or go through the barn if you don't want to jump. That's the turkey getting upset. And here come the ducks. There's always something happening. You guys came in pretty quick. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, you guys came in quick. They really did. They came in zooming. All right, not the point. So, our guys live right here because it is easy to access for winter. This coop is a little bit bigger, and we did keep a few extra quail. Usually, we winter about 6 to 8. I think we've got 14 in there right now. Another couple are not quite big enough to come into here with the older ones. So, we're going to have about 16 going through the winter. They need the extra space. They don't need a ton of space. So, that houses 16 quail. It's roomy. Then jump! I'm going to go see if I can help him. I'm literally going to go see if I can help him. Jump! Literally jump! Come on! Well, then don't. But stop having a temper tantrum like you can't get out. You can go through the barn or you can jump over that. Make a choice. He's pretending he's stuck in the pen. You're not stuck in the pen. Come here. This way. This is open. Not that way. That is wire. You can't go through wire this way. Well, make a choice. It's your problem now. You don't want to jump the way I showed you? Don't. See if I care. He's just being ridiculous. He's being nuts. We're just gonna let him be nuts. He's insane. We're not gonna worry about it. He's just gonna have a fit. If you hear him yelling, it's his own fault. I didn't do it. Just jump over the board then. It's literally a board that's this high just to keep the goat from getting in. And he can't jump over it, apparently. But he was jumping over it just fine before. He's just being stubborn. He can also go out through the barn. There's a way into the barn. He can go out the front of the barn without having to jump. He doesn't want to. Anyway, Coturnix quail. That's what we're supposed to be talking about. So, ours live here. Easier to feed them and water them in the winter. In the summer, they do move around just so they can have new areas, unlike the chickens who can free range and take themselves to new areas whenever they choose. These guys, you have to give them new areas. Again, you can't free range quail. They won't come back. They don't know that this is home. They just kind of wander where they may. So, these guys do like to have kind of a view where they can see what's going on. They don't necessarily want to be tucked in a corner out of the way where you kind of forget they exist except when you feed them. They want to be in the midst of everything. That's just what they want. And they're adorable, and they will start to talk to you. They will make their fancy little quail sounds if they get really used to you, if they get really calm. You might notice sounds where they sound like frogs. You might notice almost like crickets. Their crows are really warbly. So you get kind of a three-tone warbly sound for crows. No, I'm not going to try to do it. It's going to sound ridiculous, but it's really quite cute. These guys have a dust bathing area. They've got hiding areas where they can go up and get out of the way. They're perfectly content to watch the world go by while muttering to one another like elderly couples gossiping on the front porch. And yes, they can use that ramp. I get that question a lot. Can they use the ramp? And the answer is, of course they can. I know some people think that they can't. Some people think, well, they're never going to be able to get up a ramp because someone told them that quail don't use ramps. They absolutely do. They absolutely can. They can also kind of sort of fly. I mean, not like fly, but they can kind of sort of fly. So you have to have a top on your run. So you can use bird netting. Like if you have 6-foot walls or something, you have bird netting. They won't get out of that. But if I didn't have a top on this, they'd get out constantly because they can semi-fly. Not like real flight, but they can get out of a pen if you don't have a top. So these guys are happy, content, and really valuable to the farm. And let's start to talk about why. I want to start talking about eggs, because this is where the Coturnix quail really shine. These little birds can lay an egg a day, sometimes even more. That's rare, but they do have a shorter laying period than a chicken. So it's once a day most of the time. Sometimes they'll skip a day. Don't we all? Sometimes they'll skip a day. And every once in a while, you will have one lay very, very, very early in the morning, like 2, 3 in the morning, and then they might lay again before midnight. It's rare, but it has been known to happen with quail. It doesn't happen with chickens. But quail have a shorter time to produce that egg. Okay? Their egg goes from just being formed to being laid in a shorter amount of time. And these guys can start laying really early. I think everyone who has chickens gets kind of frustrated by having to wait for months for your chickens to lay. Even the best layers is going to be 4 to 5 months before they lay. And your average bird is going to be 6 to 8 months. And if you have specialty heritage breeds, like we have silkies, we have some silkies, not all silkies, but a lot of ours are silkies, they could take up to a year. So these guys will lay in just 6 to 8 weeks. Okay? A 6 to 8 week old hen will start to lay immediately. She will lay very, very fast, and she'll be very, very efficient as long as she has enough light. Okay? And that's one of the reasons quail are an efficient choice for a small hobby farm. Now, their eggs are tiny. They're about the size of a large grape. Okay? They are beautifully speckled, and they are surprisingly rich in flavor. The shells are mottled brown. So they're mottled. They have a base color that's either brown or cream or blue. Okay. And then they have speckling. So brown speckles. So you could have brown on brown. You could have brown on cream or brown on blue. They are very beautiful. And every single one looks like a piece of art. You could literally blow out their eggs and use them in craft projects. They're beautiful pieces of nature. And I love their eggs, okay? I like using them when I'm baking and you have to glaze the top of your rolls and you're going to use an egg to do that. But you also know that you're going to end up washing the rest of the egg down the sink or tossing it to the dogs. If you use a quail egg, you don't have any left. So you haven't wasted any. You haven't had to feed any to the dogs. So I like using quail eggs for when I'm baking and kneading to make a glaze, but I don't need a whole big egg. I just need a little one. So you're going to need, now again, talking about how small the quail eggs are. What if you wanted to replace your chicken eggs with your quail eggs? You're going to need more than one. So it's between 3 and 5, depending on the size of the quail egg and the size of the chicken egg you're replacing. You'll need 3 to 5 quail eggs per chicken egg. I would average that out and say 4 quail eggs makes a chicken egg. But obviously, if you need a larger egg, you're probably going to use 5 eggs. If you're looking for a smaller egg, you'll use only 3. And they have this great velvety texture, and they're absolutely delicious when cooked. You can hard boil them, you can pan fry them, anything you can do with a regular chicken egg, you can do with a quail egg. They're just a little smaller. They're also higher in protein, lower in cholesterol, and just make everything feel a little more gourmet. Okay, because we kind of don't have quail eggs all that often unless you have quail on your farm. So when you have the quail eggs, you kind of feel fancy. And I just like using them because I like the texture. And they're also fun to collect. There's something incredibly satisfying about going to your coop and opening the hutch door in the morning and finding a clutch of perfectly shaped, tiny little eggs nestled in the bedding like hidden treasures. It's like Easter every day, except these treasures end up on your breakfast table. And they don't really lay in nest boxes. Some will. I know somebody's going to show up later. They're going to watch this live stream at some point, and they're going to say, well, my quail lay in a nest box. I love that for you. I'm so glad. That's not normal. That's not normal. And we have our share of abnormal animals on the farm, so I am quite familiar with not normal. And it's great if they will. And I would encourage people to try providing a small nest box and see if yours will use it. I only ever had one hen that cared. Usually they're like, hey, here's an egg. Goodbye. They don't care. They just drop it wherever they happen to be. And that's fine. But they generally don't use a nest box. So it's like an Easter egg hunt. You have to check the bedding and you have to check under the waterer because sometimes they lay an egg and then they flip the waterer on top of it. The empty waterer because I've already spilled water. So definitely check for those eggs. Look everywhere you can. The turkey's an idiot. Ignore the turkey. He's being an idiot. Nothing I can do about that. Now I want to talk about meat. I know not everyone raises their animals for meat, and not everyone is interested in eating quail. We don't use these guys for meat, mostly because I want every single egg I can get. So I want the eggs badly. Therefore, it's not worth sacrificing a few for the dinner table because I want the eggs. So we don't even eat them for meat. Not that I wouldn't. I'm just saying we don't. Not everyone wants to raise them for meat. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I know that. But one of the reasons they're so popular with homesteaders and hobby farmers is because they can be used for meat. And they are relatively, I say relatively because processing an animal for consumption is never an easy task. But these guys are relatively easy. They are easier to process than a chicken or a rabbit or a turkey or anything like that. They are fairly small. It can be done fairly fast. So it's not at all intensive. And it's generally an easy process once you get used to the fact that you're doing the process at all. Because they're small and quick to mature, they are a sustainable option for those who do want to raise their own meat in a manageable way. So if you want to raise a meat animal, but you really don't have a lot of space, you can raise these guys. They mature very, very fast. Like I said, they lay eggs in 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of people will process them at like 5 to 6 weeks because they're done. They won't get too much bigger than that. Okay? There's no point with quail in waiting till they're a year or 2 years old to process them if you are going to use them for meat, because they matured a long time ago. It's not like waiting for a chicken to reach its processing weight. With quail, it happens so fast. You blink and it's already happened. So that's one of the reasons they're popular. Really, most people will process well before 8 weeks. I rarely hear of somebody who processes after 6 weeks. So 6 weeks and you got a new crop of babies that are not babies anymore. And they're either laying eggs, ready for your freezer, maybe you're selling them. There's a lot of things you can do with them. They are incredibly efficient little birds. If you're running a self-sufficient homestead, quail are one of the easiest way to add diversity without needing a ton of space. A lot of other animals need a lot of space. We all want to raise goats and sheep and cows and pigs, but all of those need a lot of space. Quail need very little. They need less space than chickens. They need less space than your ducks. They don't free range. They shouldn't free range. They won't come back. So they really are fine in just a hutch. They're okay. They're one of the few farm animals that'll say, just get yourself a hutch. It's fine. A lot of the times you'll hear me say, a hutch is too small, right? This is a hutch off of, I can't remember if, I think my mom ordered it for me, and I can't remember if she got it off Amazon or Wayfair. I can't remember. It was a gift to put quail or breeding chickens in. This is one of those few times I would say you can actually use something like that. Weatherproof it, which is why it's painted so that the wood wouldn't get destroyed. Weatherproof it. But in general, they can live in something like that. They don't need a ton of space. I have a chicken coming. What do you want? I don't have any snacks. Oh. Okay, bye. Chickens, man. All right, so you can raise these guys humanely. You can give them good lives. You can benefit from their abundance and not have been cruel to them at all. You don't have to lock them in tiny pens because they live in something like this. Again, we're going to do even larger areas because we're going to increase the number of quail and the breeds of quail that we have here on the farm. Now that we're in a location that we're planning on staying here for a very long time. But you don't have to do that. That's big enough. I mean, there's going to be 16 quail in there at the end of the day, and they will fit just fine. Okay? And honestly, if you've ever had quail meat, you know it's tender and flavorful and far more delicate than chicken. So a lot of people prefer it to chicken. Again, they're easy to process. Do you have to process more of them? Sure. At their size, you probably, if you're having dinner and you're having 4 people, you probably need 4. Each person probably needs their own bird. But that being said, they hatch in just a couple of weeks. Literally, you're talking 17 to 19 days and they've hatched. And then 6 weeks later, they're either laying eggs or ready for the table. You don't find many animals that are as efficient as they are. So now that we've talked a little bit about their housing, let's continue talking about housing, care, and feeding, because what they actually need is important if you're going to raise them humanely. A lot of people are surprised to learn just how easy they are to care for, because they are easy to care for. These guys are easier than chickens. They are easier than rabbits. They're definitely easier than the mini horse, but they're one of the easiest animals to start with. So they're really good if you are just wanting to get into birds and you're not really sure about the whole process. They're easy. Okay. And a lot of people do get surprised when I talk about just how easy they are. Our hutch setup is pretty straightforward. They have a solid bottom. We do not raise them on wire, so that upper level has a solid bottom, and the bottom is straight on the ground. There's wire there to keep predators from digging in, but we don't have to worry too much about predators because the dogs are on patrol. I don't know what the dog's doing. Dog's sitting on a log off that way. I don't know. That's fine. But we have them not on wire. They're not in a wire hutch or anything. It protects their feet. Their feet are kind of delicate, so not a great idea to raise them on wire. They have plenty of ventilation. You can see they have wire on all sides, they have a nice big open door. There's ventilation on the other side of that hutch in the top so that air can escape, because especially in the winter, you want that moisture to be able to rise and escape out a vent. They need good ventilation if you want to keep them from getting sick. You have to have a covered section. So we have the upper house bit. They can also be fairly covered in the lower bit under the house. So they need a good covered section so they can stay dry and feel safe if they need to. They're ground birds, so they don't roost. You don't have to put up roosting bars. These guys don't roost. Coturnix quail are not going to roost. They sit on the ground. But they do appreciate cozy corners and soft bedding. We tend to use paper bedding, and they really just cozy up in it, and it is really good for keeping them warm in the winter, and we just change it regularly. Not any more difficult than looking after a hamster, to be honest. Okay, plenty of bedding in the corners so that they can bed down together, and you wouldn't just keep 1 or 2 quail, especially if you have extreme winters. They do fine. Like, they are fine in here in 40 below. Okay, we get 40 below for 3 weeks at a time. They're fine in the winter. They do not need any special accommodations. You just need to make sure you have enough birds. So that house, the house part, is fairly small. So the birds can go in there and it'll keep the heat in. And yes, the upper house is insulated. We added insulation. But because the upper house is insulated, the birds can go up into that upper house. They can all cuddle together. And because it's not too big, so the smaller the house is, the better. Because then the birds can go in there, stay warm. Okay, they can stay warm together. If your house is too big, there's going to be a lot of cold air if you live where there are cold winters. So keep the house cozy, big enough for all the birds to fit in at once and to stay out of the wind. So you don't want anyone to get stuck sitting in the doorway and getting cold. But outside of that, stop touching my shoes. Sorry. There's a chicken bugging my shoes. Stop it. But outside of that, they're fine in a fairly small house. Just make sure everyone can get in it. Feed-wise, well, they do need a higher protein feed than chickens. Just find a game bird or a turkey starter. Your local poultry place, wherever you get your animal feed, probably has either a game bird or a turkey feed. I get the starter, not because they have to have the starter. They'd be fine on the regular adult feed. The problem is the adult feed tends to be too big. Like, it tends to be really big pellets because it's meant for turkeys. That's too big for these little guys. If you don't want to crush it up yourself, get turkey starter or game bird starter, which is meant for babies, and you don't have to crush it up. They survive just fine. Even as babies, they can eat it. So I would recommend that. You are looking for something that's over 22% in protein, ideally between 24 and 28. They do need a little more protein than your chickens, and their feed is a little more expensive, but they consume less of it per pound. Okay, so if you were to weigh all your birds versus all your quail versus all your chickens, and you calculate how much feed they're actually consuming, these guys consume less per pound of bird. Okay, so they are more efficient that way as well. So it's worth it to spend a little bit more on the feed. They also like little treats. Think greens or mealworms, tiny seeds, things like that. They're not as into table scraps as your chickens will be, but there are still some things they'll like. Seeds and like herbs like your parsleys and your cilantros they usually like. Things like that they're probably going to enjoy. They're probably not going to eat, usually we're throwing, pepper tops and tomato trimmings and all that into a bucket for the chickens. The quail probably aren't that interested in all that stuff, but there's still some scraps they'll eat. Just make sure the treats don't replace their main diet. Because remember, they're in a hutch, right? They're confined. So the food they're getting is the food you give them. If you give them all treats and you don't give them enough of their regular diet, or they're not eating the regular diet because they fill up on treats, well, you're going to have a problem because they're not going to get the nutrition they require. Again, they're not free-ranging, so we don't worry as much about that with our chickens or our ducks or our turkeys. That's not an issue for us there because they free range. These guys aren't free ranging. So because they're not free ranging, we have to be pretty on top of basically making sure they're getting the nutrition they require. Okay. Now, one big advantage of quail is they don't tear up your whole yard like I'm watching these two idiot chickens do right in front of me. You can keep a small group in a contained area, and you should, and they'll be perfectly happy. And they are generally quieter than chickens. They do make noise, okay? The males kind of do this funny, buzzy, warbly crow that's really quite entertaining to hear. And it's kind of like a kazoo and a rusty hinge playing at the same time. I know that sounds like a weird combination, but it's interesting. I don't think any of them have done it while we've been filming. Google quail crow, and it's a pretty interesting sound. The first time I thought I heard it, I did think someone was stuck in a feeder, and it was entertaining. The females tend to sound like frogs or crickets. They make some really cool sounds. I like their sounds on the farm. That's one of the sounds I want to hear. Now, personality, behavior kind of stuff. Well, if you've never watched quail for any length of time, you're literally missing out. They're comically expressive. They puff themselves up, they chase each other in circles, and they have this little popcorn jump that they do when they get startled, straight up in the air, like they're on springs. It's really cute. I love it. You'll be talking to them, everything's calm, and suddenly one launches 3 feet in the air and just, ah! It's really quite funny, for absolutely no reason at all. The rest look around like, well, he's dramatic today. There's always one being dramatic. Quail are hilarious. And if you are hearing some discharges in the background, it's because the hunters are out hunting the many, many geese that flew overhead a little while ago. That's one of the reasons the dogs are keeping the birds close, because we don't want accidents. So avoid accidents. So quail are also talkative, but they're not talkative in that loud, bossy way that chickens are. Quail make soft chirps and thrills and little question mark sounds. It's like they're asking if you've remembered the snacks. And it is so dang cute. In fact, I can hear them behind me. You might not be able to hear it on the mic, but I can hear quiet chirps. And there goes a quail up the ramp. And he jumped off the ramp. But further proof, the quail will use ramps. Okay, I promise. They will use ramps. They'll figure it out. They can't use like a steep ramp, but a gentle ramp, they're fine. So the sounds they make, they keep their commentary running all day, which adds to the lovely background soundtrack of any farm. If you listen closely while I'm streaming or filming videos, you'll probably hear them. Okay. I can hear them. I don't think you can. You might be hearing their chirps. You might not, but you might catch them talking when I'm filming anywhere near them. And usually I assume they're gossiping about whatever I was saying. I know they're not, but it's funny because it seems to happen whenever I start talking. Now, let's talk about breeding and lifespan, because this one takes some people by surprise when you talk about how long they're going to live. But if you're thinking about breeding quail, it's about as easy as it gets. They don't really go broody, so you'll need an incubator. But they hatch at just 17 or 18 days in the incubator. Okay, maximum I've had Coturnix quail take is 19 days. They go in the incubator, you set them in your turner, you ignore them until about day 15, then you candle them and get rid of anything that didn't develop, put them in lockdown, a couple days later, boom, babies. The chicks are about the size of a large bumblebee. They're literally about the size of the end of my thumb, like from there forward. They're tiny, okay? So they're kind of like these adorable fuzzy little marbles that immediately start zipping around like they own the place. They grow fast, and before you know it, you've got a whole new generation filling your hutch. Something you need to know about baby quail. They are almost comically looking for ways to expire. Okay? I have had baby quail hang themselves from wiring that they shouldn't have been able to hang themselves from. I have had them drown themselves in waterers specifically designed to not drown quail. They will find ways to do that. So you have to really safeguard their brooding setup. You can't have sharp corners. Like if there's a sharp corner in your brooder, they'll tend to pile up and the ones on the bottom will get smushed. So it's one of the reasons we use the type of brooder we do, which is basically a small animal playpen where the sides kind of slope and it's almost round. They can't pile on each other in a corner if there aren't any corners. So you do have to just kind of safeguard their brooding setup, make sure there isn't anything that they can shove their head in or their feet into. That's why our brooders also have solid sides halfway up, and then they have the mesh on the top for the ventilation. It's going to be some trial and error when you first start raising them to figure out what exactly you need to do to keep everybody alive for the first 8 days, 8 to 10 days, and then they're fine. It's just that initial time when it's just not great. And I do tend to put them in with 1 or 2 silky chicks just because they're a game bird. And like turkeys, they're kind of stupid when they're babies. And sometimes they won't eat. And it gets really frustrating because you're like, man, just eat. But they won't eat because they haven't seen another bird eat. Yes, you can dip their face in the water and the food, but they need to see another bird eat. And chickens don't have that feeling. So I tend to put 1 or 2 silky chicks in with the group. And then the silky chicks teach everyone how to eat. I do the same thing with turkeys. I just make sure that everybody fully understands the eating. The eating's important, guys. Lifespan. Their lifespan is relatively short. And this is where people get surprised. It's usually 2 or 3 years. Okay? So that sounds like you hardly get any time with them at all. And it's true. You don't get a ton of time. Okay? 2 or 3 years and that is it. But because they mature so quickly, you can maintain a self-sustaining flock really easily. So unlike chickens, so our silkies that we hatch this year won't lay eggs till next year. So my next generation won't be until my younger silkies are over a year old. So it takes a while to get your self-sustaining flock going. With quail, it's literally a 6-week turnaround, right? The babies are born. You're going to have multiple crops of babies through the summer and through the winter if you have your birds inside where there's plenty of light. They do need light to lay. So the moment you have less than 12 hours of light, your quail are going to drop off significantly. And if they're getting less than 10 hours of light, they're not going to lay at all. So if you are wanting your quail to lay longer, you have to have like a night light on. Not all night. Still give them 8 hours of darkness. We don't bother. Like they've already started to taper off because we're pretty far north. So it gets dark early here. They're probably going to stop laying by November and we won't see any more eggs till April. That's okay. It doesn't bother us. They'll take a break. It's fine. The young ones will lay here and there through the winter. So another good reason to keep younger birds. Same thing with chickens. The younger ones are more likely to lay in the winter than the older ones. But the shorter lifespan seems like a downer, but it's also kind of a way that you can teach your kids about life cycles and responsible animal care. Because their life cycle is shorter, you can take your kids through that process a little bit faster than you might with chickens. Like I've got chickens that are like 10, 12 years old. They're not laying anymore, but they're wandering around somewhere. Are they even behind me still? Oh, no, they're over there. Okay, they're wherever they are. But I do have older chickens. The quail are never going to live that long. It's not going to happen. But beyond all the practical reasons, I love Coturnix quail because they just make me happy. They're easy to care for. They earn their keep really early. And they bring this soft, musical energy to the farm. They're the background characters who quietly hold everything together while the goats are plotting world domination and the ducks are staging water park shenanigans. I don't know why one is in a watering can. Oh, whatever. I don't care. You got yourself in. You can get yourself out, honey. If you're wondering where the turkey went, the turkey's also over there. He figured out how to get out. He's fine. So every farm needs a little bit of calm. And for us, that's these guys. They are so cute. There's another one up the ramp. See, they use ramps. They can use ramps. It's okay to have ramps. I know you're going to have people tell you, quail don't use ramps. It's okay. Use ramps. Have tiered hutches so that you can save space, especially if you live in an urban area. Fun fact, in a lot of places that ban chickens, you can still have quail. So obviously check with your town and make sure they're not explicitly banned. But in a lot of areas, you can have a few quail. Okay, so they're great for more urban homesteads where you can't necessarily have chickens. That's why a lot of urban homesteads have quail and rabbits, because those are allowed in most urban areas, whereas chickens are banned. So fun fact, check into your town's ordinances. Maybe you can have them too. All right, so I've been talking now for about 40 minutes. So let's switch gears and go to the Q&A. If you're watching this on the replay and you want to submit a question, you can either drop it in a comment or you can send me a direct message on Facebook. Yes, I'm on TikTok. but I'm not really on TikTok. Don't send me a message there. I don't see them. I just have a few videos on there. That's basically a way to get over to YouTube where I actually am. Facebook, I check. So it's okay to send me a message on Facebook. That's where most people give me messages. So hop over there, send me a message, ask me a question, ask me to answer it on the stream, and I will add it to my list. If you do want to tune in live, you can ask questions live, and I will endeavor to answer them. But I live stream at a really inconvenient time for everybody, except for me. This is the convenient time for me. So I understand that 95% of you will watch this on the replay over the weekend. That's fine. Submit your questions through Facebook. But I do have a list of questions that people have submitted, some about quail, some about homesteading and hobby farming in general, everything from baking with eggs to baking with quail eggs to, you'll see. We'll get to the questions. So, first question is always by Katie, because Katie's always the first person to message me what the topic's going to be. She always sends me a question, so I put it at the top. How many Coturnix quail eggs do you need to equal a chicken egg? 3 to 5. It depends. For a large chicken egg, you need 5 eggs. For a small chicken egg, you only need 3. Cut the difference and use 4. Next question. How many Coturnix quail do you need to get a steady supply of eggs? A small group of 6 to 8 hens is fine for most people. They're really productive. You do get an egg a day from each hen while they have the light that they need to lay. If you have a larger family, you're obviously going to want more than that. And if it's just you and your spouse, then maybe you only need half of that. But generally, for a small family, 6 to 8 hens will give you enough. Can you mix quail with chickens? I wouldn't. I know some people have done it with success, but chickens are so much bigger and can really bully the quail that the quail are probably going to get hurt. And even if they don't, they are almost, the chickens can carry diseases that don't make the chickens sick, but will make the quail sick. So it's probably not a good idea that they share housing on a regular basis. Keep them separate if you can. Come out to having your chickens have gotten angry at the quail overnight, and you don't have any more quail. Also, quail can't free range. So if you like free ranging your chickens, you definitely can't house them together because you cannot free range the quail. They don't come back. How long do quail eggs last? If you have unwashed eggs in a cool, dark location in your house, they probably will last 3 weeks. If they're washed and in the fridge, they will last a good 3 months. So you store them however you like, just eat them before they go bad. We never have them around long enough to worry about it. Especially my younger son, Rowan, his favorite thing is hard-boiled quail eggs. So we go through quail eggs quite quickly. Do quail need perches? No. They're ground animals. They will not perch. So no matter how many perches you put in, they jump on them from time to time. But sleeping at night, they're going to sleep on the floor. They like flat, safe bases with hiding spots rather than high perches. You might be able to put in some shelves. Like that house there has, this is where my questions are, by the way. That house there has a couple of different shelves at the back. That nest box at the back. It's actually a chicken hutch, but that nest box at the back has a shelf. So there could be quail under the shelf and quail on the shelf. It kind of maximizes the space. But generally, they don't want to perch. They don't really perch. Their feet aren't meant for that. Next page. Very good. Okay. I can't change pages. There we go. So, can you eat fertilized quail eggs? Yeah. Unless you have had the eggs sitting out in the heat and they started to develop, there is no functional difference between a fertilized egg and an unfertilized egg. As long as you collect daily and you're making sure your eggs are not stored in the heat. If your kitchen is really hot, put your eggs in the fridge, and they're perfectly fine to eat. No problem. What's the difference between male and female Coturnix quail? I'm assuming other than obviously one lays eggs, one doesn't. But color-wise, some colors you can tell. So some colors you can't. Like if you have white Coturnix quail, they all look the same. But if you have something like the Egyptians, like we have, some of the silvers, if they have a rusty colored chest, that's a boy. And if they have kind of speckles on their chest instead. So their chest is dotted and there's no rusty color. Those are girls. The males also crow. So if you watch them long enough, you'll see the males make their crows, and they think they're pretty cool. How loud are quail compared to chickens or ducks? Much quieter. They do make noise, so there won't be no noise, but they are much quieter. Their sounds are gentle and musical, and they're easy to hide from neighbors in urban areas. I'm not saying you should hide them from neighbors. I'm just saying they're easy because they'll probably think they're wild bird sounds. They don't make a ton of them, and they'll probably only make the occasional sound. Your neighbors will hear it, but they'll just write it off as a wild bird because they don't sound like chickens. They do not sound like chickens at all. How often do you clean the hutch? I do a spot check every day of every pen, right? I take a quick check, and if it's like really messy, we're cleaning it now. But I clean once a week, so I rotate. So if it's the day to clean the hutch, I'm not cleaning the chicken pen because I'm not cleaning 6, 8, 10 pens all at once. I might end up with 10 pens. Don't worry about it. But I'm not cleaning that many things at once. Like if it's time to sweep out the barn, I'm not cleaning the horse pen. I rotate. So it only takes a few minutes. I mean, look at how small that house is. It takes a few minutes to scoop it out, literally with a cat litter scoop, because we use sand as a base. It only takes a few minutes. Chuck the poop, add a little bit more sand if you need to, carry on with your day. They're really easy to clean up after. Okay, but I do spot checks every day because you never know. They are tidy little birds, so they're easy to clean up after. Do quail recognize you? Absolutely. They don't love me. They love him. He brings the snacks. If you bring the snacks, they're going to love you too. So regular handling and gentle care make them calm and curious around their human. And yeah, if you bring the snacks, they will immediately know the difference between the snack person and the non-snack person. So if you want them to love you, bring the snacks. What's the funniest quail behavior you've ever seen? I really love the random popcorn jumps where they suddenly jump 2 or 3 feet in the air for no apparent reason. Every time I think I've seen it all, one will launch himself straight up and scare the rest half to death. And I think it's funny because quail are a little bit dramatic. Okay. They can be, woof, everyone scatters. It's really very funny. Are quail good starter animals for new hobby farmers? Yes. They are really low maintenance. They don't take up a lot of space. They're relatively inexpensive, so you can get quail for fairly cheap if you're looking to not spend a ton of money right now. And they're forgiving of a lot of beginner mistakes because they're really hardy little birds. Okay, if you can handle R40 below temperatures in the winter, they can handle almost anything. They're also not as likely to be susceptible to the heat as other animals are. As long as they have plenty of shade and water, they're generally fine. So they tend to handle most climates really well. Do you incubate your own eggs? Yeah. I bring adult birds onto the property because of the risk of disease. There's a whole host of diseases you could bring home. And yeah, quail can carry some of them. So we don't want disease on the farm, so I don't bring in adult birds. So therefore, I always hatch my own eggs. I have good quality incubators. A good quality incubator is worth the investment. So definitely talk about that when you're, deciding whether or not to get an incubator. Get the best incubator you can afford if you want the best quail hatch. And they only take about 17 to 19 days. Then you got baby quail. Make sure you have a plan to put them in a brooder before you put the eggs in the incubator because it's easy to forget about it for a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden, babies. How small are the chicks? End of my thumb. They're little. Think of them like fuzzy bumblebees with legs. They're little. They're little, okay? The biggest bumblebee you've ever seen is probably bigger than a baby quail. They're pretty little. Do quail get along with rabbits or ducks? Not directly, no. They have very different needs. They can't really be housed together. They can live near each other just fine. Like our ducks don't have a problem with them, but they have such different needs. I wouldn't try to have them share space. Handle cold weather. Yeah. They're out of the wind. They need to be away from the drafts and they need to be dry. The second they get wet, you're going to have a problem. So in the winter, this is going to sound bad, but we don't give them water. Why don't we give them water? These quail prefer to eat snow. I don't know why, probably because they're a more northern breed, but they like to eat snow. We literally shovel snow into their run, and we do not provide actual water. If they get wet in the winter, they will die. Okay. This is one of the few times where I say, yeah, we're going to use snow because it works. Okay. For these guys, it works. Generally, I tell people, no, you can't use snow. You have to give them water. This is one of the few animals that I don't give water in the winter. In the summer, obviously, you have to give them water. What are they going to do? Eat leaves? They have to have water in the summer. In the winter, it's freezing here. We don't want them to get wet. We provide them snow and only in the run. We don't put anything in the house. Even their food is outside. So their house is warm and dry throughout the winter. And we get 40 below and they handle it like champs. Like they're not even uncomfortable. In fact, when they're all in that house, if you stick your hand in there, it's really nice in there. I'm not worried about them being cold. They can handle a variety of different weather situations and not feel the bad effects. What are the ideal temperature for quail eggs in the incubator? The same as most bird eggs, 99.5 Fahrenheit or 37.5 Celsius, depending on what scale you use. And with the quail, you want lower humidity than you imagine. Quail are really prone to drowning, so you want to lower that humidity. Instead of, a lot of people say keep it 50 or 60 throughout incubation, drop that to 40 or even a little bit lower. Quail do tend to drown in the egg. Okay, they drown inside that egg. You need enough moisture to get out of that egg through incubation. And you have to remember they only have a little over 2 weeks in the incubator. So there's not a lot of time for that moisture to evaporate from the egg. So you really need to make sure you are keeping that humidity a little lower than you would with chickens. How many eggs lay per year? Quite a lot. Probably averaging between 250 and 300 eggs a year per hen. That's a lot of eggs. So they're definitely worth having on the farm. They're efficient little guys. Can quail eggs be pickled? Yep. If you like pickled eggs, you will love pickled quail eggs. A tangy dessert, not dessert, a tangy treat, very flavorful, little bit fancy, great for a snack. My younger son Rowan thinks pickled quail eggs are pretty delicious too. Do quail need dust baths like chickens? Yes. Like a lot of birds, unlike the ducks, not the ducks, but the chickens and the turkey, a dust bath keeps them clean. It's how they keep the bugs off of them. So yeah, you just provide them some sand and whatever you might like adding to your dust bath. Whatever you use for your chickens is probably just fine for the quail. What do quail eat in the wild? Whatever they find, seeds or insects or grains, greens, very similar to what they eat here. Except I give them also commercial food to make sure they're getting the right balance of nutrients. But generally, the same thing most birds eat in the wild, whatever they can find. How can you tell if a quail egg is fertile? Well, you can crack them and look for a bullseye, but then you can't incubate that egg because you've cracked it. The best way is to put them in the incubator for 10 days and then candle them. Get yourself a good quality candler. Some people use the flashlight on their phone. An actual egg candler is better, but use what you have. And check and see if they're developing. They're developing after about 10 days. You'll see they're quite dark instead of light passing through the entire way. If they're dark and impeding the light, then they're probably fertile. What predators go after quail? Anything. Rats, snakes, weasels, raccoons, foxes, hawks, whatever you've got, anything that can get to them will eat them. They are walking snacks. So yeah, you do have to worry about predators. You don't have to worry so much because we have the dogs, but yeah, even your neighborhood cats will eat them if they can get to them. So think a lot about predator protection when you're setting up your quail enclosure. How do you protect quail from the heat? Shade, cool water, and really good ventilation in their house, and they'll be fine, I promise. If you're really, really hot, like roasting, you might want to get a frozen water bottle and put that in their pen. They can lean against it if they get hot, but generally quail handle the heat really. So generally, I wouldn't worry about it. Super hot, maybe give them a frozen water bottle. Do quail molt like chickens? Yep. Usually around once a year, all of a sudden there's feathers everywhere and you can't figure out why. They're molting. It's normal. They might stop laying for a bit when they're molting, but they'll come back strong. They just basically need to rejuvenate themselves. They shed those old feathers, grow in some new ones, and they come back looking better than ever. What's your favorite way to cook quail eggs? And I did this recipe, I think I did it on the channel. I think there's a video where I make it. Hard-boiled quail eggs in a teriyaki sauce. They're a fantastic, fantastic snack. My son Rowan thinks they're the best thing ever. Some people like them soft-boiled, some people like them hard-boiled or pan-fried. Pan-fried and stuck on top of a salad is really nice. They're lots more hard-boiled and thrown into a salad. There's lots of ways to enjoy a good quail egg. Can you free-range quail? No. First of all, they're really small and really vulnerable, and they get eaten by literally anything that likes to eat stuff. But beyond that, okay, with chickens, beyond the eating, they also don't home. So they don't know where home is. And because they don't know where home is, they're not going to come back. Okay, they just wander off. So no, you can't free range them. Do quail smell bad? These guys don't smell, but I clean their hutch weekly. If you keep them clean, no. Quail themselves don't smell. Their enclosure will smell if you never clean it. Like most things. Like your cat litter box. If you never clean your cat litter box, it's going to stink. How do quail compare to ducks in maintenance? They are way easier. Ducks I would classify as much harder because of the water issue. They like to make everything water. Quail don't need water features, and they stay so much cleaner. There's so much less that you have to do when it comes to keeping them healthy and safe. As long as they're in a hutch and they have food and water and shelter, they're fine. Can you use quail manure as fertilizer? Yes, but it is high in nitrogen. So you need to compost it first. Okay, it's not like rabbit manure. Rabbit manure you can just take from your pens and put it straight in your garden. Quail has to be composted, just like your chickens and your goats and your horse. It all has to be composted. So make sure it's composted first. The lifespan years, if they have really great care, we have had ones live around that long. Coturnix quail, it's just not in the cards. But they are wonderful pets. Just raise them as pets. They're also fun pets. Okay, and they live a longer. They live about as long as you'd have a hamster. You'll probably have them, and they're fantastic. Do you name your quail? It depends. Some of them we give names, but we have a lot that look the same right now. So in theory, they have names. In reality, I can't really always tell them apart. In theory, they have names. Like I have as many names assigned to that pen as there are quail in that pen, but some of them look really similar and I can't tell them apart. Okay, so they're all basically the quail squad, and that's the way they stay. They're awesome. Do quail like being handled? If they're used to it, maybe. Generally, they might like you to hang out near them, but they don't necessarily want you to pick them up. If they're really used to it and they've been used to it from when they were babies, yeah, they're okay being handled. Can you use quail eggs in baking? Yeah, as long as you compensate for the fact that they're itty bitty. Use about 4 per chicken egg and you'll be fine. Your cakes will be extra rich and delicious. How do you candle such small eggs? A candler with a small end. I use an actual egg candler. You can use a bright flashlight. You can use your phone if you need to, but generally I would use an actual candler. You do have to be gentle. Remember that quail eggs, their shells are really thin, so be very, very gentle. What's one unexpected benefit of keeping quail? The peaceful background noise. I love the sounds they make. Crows, it just makes the farm sound alive, but not chaotic. Can quail swim? No. They should not try. They will drown. They're land birds through and through. Do not provide them enough water to swim in. It won't go well. How do you introduce new quail to your flock? Slowly. Okay? Either use a divider and let them get to know each other, or I like to spray everyone down with diluted lemon juice and it makes everyone smell the same, and then do it at night. And because everyone smells the same, and you did it at night so nobody saw you do it, our quail are pretty dumb. Our quail are not smart. So they just accept to go, oh, we all smell the same. Awesome. It works. So they can be territorial if you just shove them in together. So do it in darkness, spritz them with a little diluted lemon juice, and it'll be fine. Do quail play with toys? Sort of. So a pile of hay or a couple of pine cones, yeah, they'll have fun. What's your favorite thing about raising Coturnix quail? Their personality and their sounds. These guys are calm and they're funny. They're endlessly fascinating. They remind me that even the smallest creatures bring something special to farm life. And it's amazing. I absolutely love them. So I think it's fun. I think it's great, right? I think quail are absolutely fantastic. And I want those quail around all the time. I think quail to me are one of the things I would forever have on the farm. Like, I would have them forever. Okay. Well, I gotta go. It's now really raining. So and I have to go anyway. I can't usually spend more than that. Is going to be it for us. I hope you really enjoyed learning a little bit about Coturnix quail. Let me know if there is a farm animal you would like to learn about in the future. We are going to do this once a month, third Friday of every month, Animal Spotlight. Next week, we are going to be talking about a farm myth, something a lot of people believe that's just not true. We will come back and do that next week, so stay tuned for that. And I'm glad you joined me here today on the farm, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Let's go out by taking a look at some of the birds that are over that way. And I can't see if I even line that up properly because I'm over here. Yeah, some of the birds hanging out over there. We got ducks. Ducks hanging out over there. They're beautiful.